Good afternoon, Shana Tova. It's Tuesday, the 15th of September. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open with the third consecutive day of clashes between Palestinian rioters and police in Jerusalem's Old City. The violence was renewed soon after the Temple Mount opened to visitors this morning, when masked assailants began throwing rocks towards the Mughrabi Bridge, which connects the Western Wall Plaza with the Temple Mount and is the access point for non-Muslim visitors. The rioters then fled into the Al-Aqsa Mosque and hurled at least one firebomb, concrete blocks, rocks, lighted flares, and firecrackers at police and border guards attempting to enter the compound. Security forces worked to take down makeshift blockades, forcing the door of the mosque to remain open and close the rioters within. Calm was again restored, and the site was reopened to Jewish visitors and tourists with no further disturbances. In a statement, police said the violence carried out over the past 3 days was specifically intended to disrupt the routine visitation to the Temple Mount during observance of the Rosh Hashanah Jewish New Year, which began at sunset on Sunday. At least 2 police officers and a Jewish youth in the area were lightly injured by rock throwers. A Hamas spokesman said that the escalation at the mosque is a declaration of war, and he asked that the world intervene to stop what he termed the crimes being committed. And just a short time ago, IDF soldiers injured a Palestinian rioter in the West Bank town of Tulkarem in efforts to disperse a violent demonstration of some 100 people, which included the throwing of firebombs. The U.S. State Department voiced concern about the continuing violence at the Temple Mount.
The United States is deeply concerned by the recent violence and escalating tensions surrounding the Haram al-Sharif Temple Mount. We strongly condemn all acts of violence. It is absolutely critical that all sides exercise restraint, refrain from provocative actions and rhetoric, and preserve unchanged the historic status quo on the Haram al-Sharif Temple Mount, in word and in practice.
The custodian of the Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem is Jordan, and King Abdullah issued a warning to Israel over the clashes. In a statement issued ahead of a meeting with British Prime Minister David Cameron in Oman, Abdullah said that his kingdom was very concerned and angered over the recent escalation in Jerusalem, particularly at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. He accused Israeli security services of crossing red lines and stoking tensions by storming Islamic holy sites. He also threatened that Jordan will spare no effort to contact world powers and international organizations to put an end to what he alleged are recurring Israeli violations and attacks against shrines in the holy city.
We've gotten reassurances from the Israeli government that this will not happen. Unfortunately, these are reassurances we've heard in the past. So I'd like to state in your presence that if this continues to happen, actually as of today, any more provocations in Jerusalem will affect the relationship between Jordan and Israel, and Jordan will have no choice but to take action.
A short time from now, at the conclusion of the Rosh Hashanah holiday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will convene an emergency meeting of his top cabinet members to discuss deterrent measures against Palestinian violence, including the fast-tracking of legislation to introduce mandatory minimum sentences for suspects convicted of throwing rocks and firebombs. He will consult with ministers of Defense Moshe Ya'alon, Ayelet Shaked of Justice, and Public Security Gilad Erdan, as well as Attorney General Yehuda Weinstein, members of the State Attorney's Office, and other security officials. The session comes in the wake of the Temple Mount violence, as well as the death of 64-year-old Alexander Levlovich, who died after losing control of his car when he came under attack by rock throwers late Sunday night. 2 other passengers in the car were also injured in the incident, which occurred on Asher Viner Boulevard in Jerusalem's Arnona neighborhood, as the 3 were returning home from a Rosh Hashanah dinner together. Opposition leaders are standing with the Prime Minister in his attempts to end the violence. Yesh Atid party leader Yair Lapid issued a statement that he would definitely support the anticipated legislation, saying that the rock-throwing terror attack that killed Alexander Levlovich reminds us all that stones kill. He went on to express his condolences to the victim's family. He announced his full support of any actions taken to restore security and called on the government to do everything in its power to fight terrorism, including forceful measures against these rock throwers, as well as any terror activity that threatens the citizens of the State of Israel. Zionist Union member of Knesset Tzipi Livni echoed those statements, saying that attacks like those in Jerusalem over the Jewish New Year must be stopped. The former justice minister added that we must act against stone terror like any other terror, with a heavy and uncompromising hand. The IDF today announced that warning shots were fired towards Palestinians in southern Gaza after identifying gunfire emanating from the suspects near the security fence. The Hamas rulers of the Palestinian territory reported that the fired-upon vehicles belonged to them and that one person was wounded in the gunfire. Turning now to the European refugee crisis, and EU ministers have failed to break a deadlock over the sharing of responsibility for sheltering some of the hundreds of thousands of people who have sought asylum in Europe this year, leaving the shape of a final deal in doubt. Determined opposition from a core of ex-communist eastern states blocked efforts by Germany and France to secure agreement for a proposal by the EU executive to relocate 120,000 people from frontier countries according to mandatory national quotas. After 6 hours of argument, ministers put off a decision, saying they hope to agree on a deal to find places for the asylum seekers at another meeting on October 8th. Officials said that following a final legal endorsement of an earlier plan to relocate 40,000 people to countries that volunteer to take them, Hungary and Slovakia led resistance to pleas for the larger new number. They argue such schemes will draw more migrants and lead to further mass movements that threaten Europe's open border system. Officials put a brave face on the divisions after a day in which a German decision to reimpose frontier control with Austria to check a flow of refugees triggered a domino effect that threatens Europe's open borders. The ministers did agree to increase manpower and resources protecting the external frontiers, as well as aid to the UN Refugee Agency and other states sheltering millions of Syrians fleeing civil war. The differences of opinion among the European states about how to solve the crisis was clear from the statements made by various officials.
It is absolutely essential that this council helps to start putting order in this situation. What's happening now is extremely negative, first of all, for people in need of protection that suffer again inside Europe after having suffered so much before coming. Doesn't give a good image of the European Union, the continent. It is the ideal environment for smugglers and even facilitates the movement of those that are not in need of protection and join the flow in an opportunistic way.
We think that quotas is not the solution. And we have to help the countries which are most affected by this huge flows of migrants.
It is the moment for all of us to think and act in a European way, on the basic principles of solidarity and responsibility. It is the moment to prove that we really think and act as Europeans.
The UK will not be taking part in the EU's relocation scheme, but since the Syrian crisis began, we have taken more than 5,000 Syrian refugees and asylum seekers, and last week announced we'll be taking 20,000 Syrian refugees over the course of this Parliament, but we will take them direct from camps in the region. We do need to act in a coordinated way in Europe, and what we need to do urgently is set up registration centres so that people are properly fingerprinted and registered when they arrive in Europe. We also need to be setting up removal centres in transit countries in Africa. By doing these things, we can ensure we offer protection to those who need it and return the economic migrants who do not.
Meanwhile, former British Foreign Secretary and International Rescue Committee Chief David Miliband urged Europe to take more affirmative and coordinated action to tackle the migrant crisis. Miliband made the comments while visiting a refugee registration camp on the Greek island of Lesbos. In the last week, more than 20,000 migrants have been ferried from Lesbos, the worst-hit island, to the Greek mainland, but the flow to Europe continues unabated.
Some of the scenes we've seen have been shameful for Europe. No one should believe that fences are going to keep people out. Fences will simply mean more ingenuity and more money for criminal gangs to get into Europe. And it's absolutely evident that this problem has to be addressed at source, partly in a humanitarian way, partly in a political way, partly in a legal way, because where there are no legal routes, people will pursue illegal routes, and that's what people have had to do. But also there's a humanitarian imperative now in Europe, because frankly we're dealing with families who've kids with cancer, pregnant women, and they need some help. Europe is at a tipping point. A tipping point means either there's going to be bold, coordinated, effective action, or there's going to be a descent into chaos, or more chaos. And that's why Europe's response has been very slow to this crisis. Europe needs to make up for lost time. And the only way to do that is to take some bold decisions that both address the immediate situation here in Europe and address the situation in the neighboring states of Syria, notably. I think it's obviously inadequate to think that 4,000 or 5,000 from a country, the UK. If you had 25,000 refugees arriving in the UK this year, that would be 40 for every parliamentary constituency. No one is going to persuade me that 40 refugees in each parliamentary constituency is going to overwhelm the UK.
22 migrants drowned and 211 more were rescued when a boat capsized in the Aegean Sea off the Turkish coast while trying to reach the Greek island of Kos today. They were trying to reach the island when the boat went down about 2.5 kilometers off the resort town of Bodrum, where the drowned body of Syrian toddler Aileen Kurdi washed up 2 weeks ago. Some Holocaust survivors are urging Israel to do more to help the migrants, as we hear in this report from CNN.
Refugee-loaded trains running again in Europe, a traumatic reminder of a nightmare childhood for Colette Avital. She was born in Romania in 1940.
We've been refugees ourselves because we in the 30s and in the 40s found all the gates closed in front of us. Because when you see the scenes of what has happened at the train station in Budapest, you can't forget the trains that led the Jews to their death.
Avital remembers her family being forced from their home when she was a little girl and years of hiding in terror from the Nazis. She looks at pictures from 70 years ago and shudders. Avital is one of a growing number of Holocaust survivors calling on Israel to take in refugees.
Why does the refugee crisis in Europe strike such a chord with Holocaust survivors?
I think many of them have been traumatized by the kind of pictures they've seen. By the number of people on the roads with babies. Certainly the picture of that baby dead on the beach is something which has been a wake-up call to many.
There's been a growing debate within Israel about whether to take in any refugees, since Israel and Syria share a tense border. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it would threaten Israel's security.
Israel is a small country, a very small country, that lacks demographic and geographic depth. Therefore, we must control our borders, both against illegal migrants and terrorism.
When Jews speak of the Holocaust, they often say never again. They won't let it happen again. Avital says for that to mean something, never again has to apply to everyone.
Professionals from around the world recently gathered in Caesarea for the ID2 Israel-designed International Development Conference. It included experts from a variety of sectors, including the agriculture, health, education, and energy industries, to brainstorm solutions for developing countries. Our Ruth Sheva spoke to several of those who were at the three-day event.
The Schusterman Foundation has brought here 70 fantastic and impressive entrepreneurs, investors, and international development professionals from all around the world to gather here in Israel for 3 days.
ID Squared is all about Israeli-designed international development. We're here to talk about entrepreneurship for development, how we can solve the main challenges of the world, or the pressing challenges of the world, through entrepreneurship, through innovation, and through technologies.
I believe in social change, and I believe that young people are sort of the facilitators of this change.
The traditional narrative of Tikkun Olam and doing international development work has traditionally been viewed from the non-profit side. In the previous few years, we've been seeing a shift in the discourse and the narrative, with the realization that we can actually harness the positive power of business and investments and use them to create sustainable and scalable impacts in the developing world.
We have entrepreneurs from all around the world. We have people that are investors, social entrepreneurs, and development practitioners from 20 different countries, and they're all here to come together to see how they can work with Israeli entrepreneurs to provide solutions for the pressing challenges of the world we live in.
So it's good to be good, but is it also worth it to be good? It's, I can tell you from a personal point of view that it's really worth it. And we're currently in Terra in our second fund, which means our investors believed in us again, that we will be able to return the investment and make more money, because we're not only investing in order to make good revenues, but also to make good impact and influencing the world in verticals of health, transportation, education, agriculture, food, water, energy, and etc. So these are verticals that if you provide value to the end user, he's willing to pay a lot of money in order to save resources and energies.
It's not volunteering, it's a professional field. You can actually earn income from it. You can develop a career in it. It's not something to do on the side. The world today is in a state that this is where we're going. Development aid is happening within our countries and outside of our countries, and if we don't attend to it professionally, give it the attention that needs to be given to it, invest in it, the future is pretty bleak.
Yes, it's no coincidence that this event is taking place in Israel. Israel is known the world over as the startup nation. It's the home of countless entrepreneurship, innovations, and technologies that are changing the world. And what we're really trying to do is shift the narrative to Israel as the development startup nation, which means it's a hub for, a provider of, and a partner to solutions which are changing the world.
Israel is one of the countries that went through a rapid development process from a developing country only 60 years ago to a developed country, and many of the challenges we faced in the past are solved through entrepreneurship, technologies, and innovation. And the idea is how we can connect that, the knowledge base, the resources, and the ingenuity that we have in Israel to partners in developing countries, and connect the needs on the ground there to the entrepreneurship over here.
And instead of working after the military service in a technological unit on algorithms that help you to sell more ads, we will have them to work on algorithms that will help you to bring more food to the plate, cleaner water, or consume less energy. And these are the things that end user will be able to pay more for them.
No, it's actually a fantastic opportunity to connect with people on different subjects. It's a positive agenda, how they can see Israel as a provider of solutions for the developing world. Israelis and entrepreneurs in Israel as partners to their endeavors, where they're trying to change and solve solutions in the developing world.
For somebody in the tech space, I was very interested to come and meet different people. I love the weather. It's similar to back home in Ghana, so I feel right at home here. And the people are friendly. We went to Jerusalem, so it was also wonderful as a Christian.
You're going to go home and tell people it's a good place to come to?
Definitely. So I'm going to be the biggest, advocate for Israel.
In entertainment news, the 18th Israeli Music Festival kicks off tomorrow. For 6 days in 6 cities, dozens of musical performances by some of the best orchestras, chamber ensembles, soloists, and conductors will be on stage. This year, Yosef Tal was chosen as Composer of the Year, and his works will be spread across a variety of domains, including chamber, opera, and electronic music. The musical productions take place every day in a different city, kicking off in Netanya, then heading to Haifa, Tel Aviv, Beersheba, Jerusalem, and Rishon LeZion in that order. All of the events are free of charge. That's the Israeli Music Festival from September 16th through the 21st. And it was another busy holiday. As well over 100,000 people enjoyed Rosh Hashanah in the great outdoors, visiting the country's parks and nature reserves. Water attractions in the north drew in the largest crowds, and many headed to places like Caesarea, while others headed for the beach, either on the Mediterranean Sea, the Sea of the Galilee, or the Red Sea in Eilat. Other popular spots were Tel Dan, the Banyas, and the Ein Gedi oasis in the Judean desert, all in attempts to cool off from the higher-than-normal temperatures we've been enduring. And turning to the forecast, and the IBA weather team is predicting no change in temperatures, with chances of light local rain in the eastern and southern parts of the Negev and Arava. Here are the highs and lows for the next 24 hours at home and abroad. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. Please join us again tomorrow when Aaron Viner will be here to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. Until then, I'm Laura Cornfield, wishing you a good evening, Shana Tova, and Shalom from Jerusalem.